Ted Tagami. Thank you so much for meeting with us today. I'd like you to open up by sharing a little bit about who you are and how you got involved in space.
Oh my goodness. Hi, good morning, guys. My name's Ted Tagami. I'm co-founder of a company called Magnitude.io. And Magnitude has an interesting name, just like an earthquake. You know, you have orders of magnitude, and that's the kind of impact we wanted to make on education. Yeah, how I got started in space, I was 6 years old and they were going to the moon. So that's always been an inspiration, although I've been sidetracked and done a number of things. When you start to get kind of old, I'm up there, I'd consider late middle-aged, hopefully you've done a lot of different things, and I've brought a lot of different things to where we are right now. Magnitude's 8 years old now, and starting from zero. Full disclosure for your listeners or your audience, people are tuning in. I don't have a science background, like a degree. So I'm not an engineer. I'm actually not even an educator outside of being I think a focused parent. My kids are men now, they're 24 and 26. But I bring an art perspective to things. I want, during the learning process, I want people to feel something. If you're not feeling something, if you're not asking questions, if you're not starting to get curious and I'm doing something wrong, or the environment's not right, or it's just not interesting to you. So for me, it's about a creation where I want to have an emotion. And if you're repulsed about something, you know what? Awesome. You know that's not right for you. If you're like, wow, what's next? Then it's like, okay, I think you found something. And for me, it's like good art, and space has done that for me. And I think it's helped schools around the world and students around the world to get those kinds of experiences.
That's great. As we record this, it's the day after William Shatner touched the edge of space. And when you talk about art and evoking an emotional response, that's fantastic, because we know that Bill Shatner did not accomplish anything technologically, but I see all over social media, his response, his emotional, his feelings and observations of what just happened to him. Phenomenal, right? So we totally get it. We actually have some students that their happy place is designing mission patches and envisioning what the future space settlement will look like on Mars. And so they're Imagineers of a sort.
In our children's book recently, we've got a group of young writers who have taken on the fact that there seems to be a lack of children's picture books that are actually informative, about what's going on here in what for us, the Florida, the Space Coast area. So they've taken to illustrating and writing books for very young children.
That's awesome. That's one thing that I think the modern education system kind of squeezes and out of our youth. And as they get older, they start forgetting some of that. They don't exercise that imagination muscle, the creativity muscle. And I've worked with some students that have come out of the top universities and they don't know what to do. Give them a set of instructions, they will follow it explicitly and they will dial it in, they'll turn it on time and it's perfect. Tell them to figure out or imagine what's going to happen. They're going to sit there for a while and just, can you give me some direction? Can you give me a little help? And we got to start exercising that muscle when they're young. Really, how might we influence the high school and the university students now? We have a workforce development challenge in the United States and really around the world as we're looking to solve almost feels like insurmountable problems with spaceship Earth, right? We're, Bucky Fuller, right? We've got this, you think about going to another world and getting in a spacecraft. We're in an amazing spacecraft. It's Earth. It's got everything we need right now. All the systems work and they're in harmony. How might we preserve that for 100,000 years or whatever, 10 million years or 100 million years? And right now, let's go to Mars, right? It's because, we've kind of messing this thing up. Let's, I don't know. We can go on about that, but I think we have a wonderful spaceship right now and we're going through the galaxy and spinning around on one of the arms there. And we are traveling through space. We just don't really recognize that, realize it. And then the lights at night in the cities dim the sky and we forget. And where did all those stories come from? Where did all the imagination of our older generations as they looked to the sky and they started imagining the gods and the goddesses and how things were created, and they could look in the heavens and they can map the stars and say that was somebody. To me that's incredible. And we've started to obfuscate the sky, and that's really connects us to the rest of the world.
That
rest of the universe.
Outstanding. They say that space will kill you. Everything about space will kill you. And you're right. We are living on the only hospitable place in the universe right now that we know for certain. That brings me to a little thing you said there. I don't think that us being excited about space exploration, all of that, has to be mutually exclusive from taking care of our current spacecraft, as you'd say.
Well, and what I was going to add is that, where I kind of fall into our pair is that I work with our debate students or students as they're communicating about the content that Kevin teaches. And one of our debate topics often is like, if we're talking about going out for future settlements, how can we be good stewards of that when we can't even take care of what we already have? And so it's a great debate for students to actually have to think about the ethics involved in settlements and the fact that we haven't really done a great job with what we have so far. Even when we look at like the idea of orbital debris and what's going on out there, we can't even clean up what we've already started. And yet we've envisioned about just leaving this behind and starting over again. What is there to ensure that we're going to do it right?
Right. Well, that in a way kind of leads to the projects that we do at Magnitude. It took us 4 years, again, starting from zero baseline here as an art guy, right? Surrounding myself with my smart co-founder and my colleagues, and then starting to reach out to experts in the fields that are related to space, whether it's engineering or the sciences. And the beautiful thing about space exploration and considering anything beyond this wonderful atmosphere that we have is it's a transdisciplinary endeavor. You're going to need the chemist and the physicist and the bio, everybody, right? And of course, engineering, whether it's hardware or software. And I also like to say wetware, right? So the bioengineering is really going to be a big part of things and how we might bioengineer things to work beyond Earth, gravity and what have you, being partial or even a microgravity. And so what we do, it took us 4 years, but we launched a project in February of 2017 on SpaceX 10. It was called ExoLab. And since then, we've launched 9 missions of ExoLab to the International Space Station. And what's interesting here is the way we're able to do that. It takes place because of the systems that have been put in place over a period of time. And I guess the best analogy I can bring up, I use it quite often, is that 40-foot container that you see on the back of an 18-wheeler, the big rig on the highway, right? It might be on a rail car, it might be on a ship coming into port. That 40-foot container can be filled up with something anywhere in the world and get sent anywhere else for a few $1,000. Pretty incredible intermodal transportation. We got that for space. It's just not a 40-foot container, right? It's one of these guys. And you recognize these as maybe as a CubeSat, but they also make them as labs. And so these are like building blocks, like little Legos, as you guys know. Our units that are in space have been 2 of these, or sometimes now the more recent ones are 4 of these, or 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters by 10. And they run our experiments. And what's nice about our labs is when you do all that engineering work and what have you, especially if they're folks that might have done it for the first time, it goes up to space. And if it's a satellite, you're probably not going to see it come back. At least all the technology that works today, you're going to expect it's going to decay in its orbit and burn up. Unless you got a polar orbit, it's going to stay up there maybe for a couple decades. But with the Cube Labs, we design what we need to do. We send it up and it comes home. It comes back home in the trunk of the Dragon, right? Oh, how nice is that? So we can then do post-flight research on what we're doing. And then it opens up, what do you want to do? Well, there are 3 things that people focus on for the most part when they think about doing experiments. As my friend there from the UK likes to say, halfway between the celestial and the terrestrial, they're on the International Space Station. And one is Earth observation. And you can do that with a satellite too, but let's look down at our beautiful blue planet, 250 miles below us, or 400 kilometers below us, as we fly over it at some ridiculous speed, like 17,000 miles an hour. So that's one, Earth observation. Another one is the extreme environment that we have up there, the vacuum of space, the radiation, right? So those are other considerations. And then the one that we're focused on is that microgravity component. What happens when you take this force that's been, and some people describe it to me as not even being a force, it's still kind of indeterminate. What is gravity, right? And you get a lot of different answers. Talk to the smartest people, I'll give you something a little different. bring some formula up, but we still really don't know what gravity is, which is pretty amazing to me. But is the lack of that in living things is what we're focused on. But people look at that in materials. They look at that in microfluidics. There's just so many different applications when you start thinking about, well, geez, what happens when there isn't any gravity or very little gravity in the process. And so what we've been doing with ExoLab from #1 back in 2017 up to #9, it came home just a couple of weeks ago, is what does life do when you remove that vector, that force? Plants, we're studying plants, they behave quite differently, and the humans do as well. You can read the Mark and Scott Kelly experiment, the twins. Scott went to space,
Right.
Mark stayed on the ground, and their gene expressions were different, right? Some were quite significantly different. Why? And it's kind of like a rubber band, it kind of comes back. But might we, through this research, and you talk to really advanced folks, discover a protein or a sequence that might help us understand how a plant can thrive in higher temperatures, or in
Yes.
brackish water, or maybe even in the perchlorates on the surface of Mars and the regolith there, right? And so that's kind of stumbling through, like, research is kind of fun because you really don't know what you're ending up with. You're just trying some different things. You got a hypothesis, and hopefully some smart people are guiding you a little bit about what you want to try. And so our last experiment here, I'll describe it real briefly, and then I'm sure you've got more ideas for me or thoughts, is we're growing a plant along with a bacteria. And on Earth here, they form a wonderful relationship, a symbiotic relationship. The plant is part of the legume family. Legumes, you think about like beans and what have you. We flew a little tiny plant called Trifolium pratense. It's a little red clover. It's just like a green bean or what have you. And what it does is it works really closely with a bacteria in the soil we have on Earth called rhizobia. Rhizobia actually does something the plants can't do, or majority of plants, plurality of plants can't do this: fix nitrogen from our atmosphere. Of course, most of our atmosphere is nitrogen, and nitrogen is one of those important ingredients to make plants work. Of course, without plants, we wouldn't have any life at all, because everything, it's the whole food chain, right?
Right.
And so this bacteria fixes the nitrogen down in the soil, but it needs carbohydrates, it needs sugars to kind of keep on growing. Well, that's what the plant can do. Photosynthesis, it's doing its gig. And those carbohydrates get down in the roots, and the bacteria are going, hey, wait, we got something here. Can you do a little exchange? So they do this little dance, and the bacteria gives the nitrogen to the plant through these root nodules that get developed. And then the plant's giving it the carbohydrates, and they thrive, and these nodules form. And inside there's some chemistry happens, as they tell me, and it gets converted to nitrates and nitrites, and then to ammonia, everything the plant needs to thrive. What's beautiful here is you talk about a cover crop, and quite often you talk about sustainability and redevelopment of our soils here on Earth. It's these cover crops like the legumes, like these clover, and it builds a healthy soil base. And so what's nice is when these cover crops get turned over, stamped down by animals, those nodules stay in the ground, and now we have nitrogen enriched soil. We're not using synthetic fertilizers. The synthetic fertilizers are absolutely amazing. They've enabled us to do this huge reach in production, right? Massive production at a cost.
Yeah,
We're depleting our soils. And Spaceship Earth here, we have about 60 years of fertile topsoil left on our planet. Yeah, according to the United Nations, 60 years. And that clock is ticking, and we're using artificial fertilizers. We're killing all the microorganisms in order to produce more. And this is the same problem we have with our air, carbon dioxide, with sea level rise. So the Industrial Revolution was incredible. It lurched us forward into this age of production. But now we're getting smart enough at the micro level to go realize, hold on a minute, we've got things out of balance here. You make those batteries for electric cars, what's happening with all that waste? You go around any battery manufacturing plant, and it looks like Venus. It doesn't look good. So there's a thing that we need to kind of get back in shape, and I want to introduce that to our young folks. Don't want to get dystopic about it. I think I want to get them to help us figure out what the big problem is, and it will require a transdisciplinary approach. So I'll get off my soapbox, and I imagine you have some.
No, I'm fascinated by what you're saying with that last one. I think about the depletion of the soil in general, and since we've been doing that, we've had an increase in all of these, these gut issues with the microbiome, even all related to that as well. So our own biology is being affected by, that soil situation. Tell me a little bit about how schools get involved with your programs. Are you working with only universities, high schools? Or how does a teacher or someone like that find out about you?
Oh my goodness. Well, we just started banging the drum ourselves back then, saying, hey, we're doing some cool stuff in space. Who's interested? And we got some folks involved, and we work generally at the school district level. And when we started, it was just predominantly United States here, working with the US National Lab on the space station. Just big shout out. We would not be able to do any of our work at all without the US National Lab. It's a nonprofit funded through an act of Congress. It works very closely with NASA. And it manages half of the US upmass to the space station and also half of the astronaut time, the US astronaut time. So super, super important. If you're a student, if you're a teacher, if you're a school district, and you want to do anything in space, the US National Lab is there to help you out. And I've got another hat I wear, a virtual hat, and that says education chair for the US National Laboratory User Advisory Committee. So we listen and we recommend, and it's a 2-year post that I'm in. And I have a group of 6 others, and that we convene. We convene every 2 weeks to talk about what's happening right now and what the US National Laboratory can do. In fact, in a few weeks, I'll send you guys a link. We're encouraging people to join us in a session in which you can listen, get updates, not just from education, but from research and development, from the sciences, from the flight manifest folks to help us get to space, the guys that fill up the cargo and send it up. So to get an idea of what's happening and questions that you can ask as well. So I'll send you guys a link, and it'd be great if everyone joined us for that and listen in. And we're always open to listening and hearing more. What's the best way to move forward? But to answer your question directly, Shauna, it's K-12 is what we have been focused on, but clearly there's a demand for workforce development and career and technical education pathways going up through university, master's, doc, postdoc. So we're looking now at developing those kind of roadmaps as well. Awesome. So it's really a matter of where the research lies. We're kind of the tail wagging the dog a little bit. We have been coming up with what we thought was exciting, and then finding researchers that was their field of study. Our post-flight research right now is getting just way over my head here. So I'll say the words, and I know a little bit about it, but if you want to do a little homework or you know what that's about, I think you might get pretty excited. So our plants fly in space. We're not quite sure what they do, but we want to understand not just at the macro level, because we've got a camera that looks at it. I'll show you what the ExoLab looks like this on Earth, by the way, and I'll describe that in a second. It's a 2U equivalent. So we look at all the macro stuff. We can read the carbon dioxide, we can read the temperature and humidity, get a camera image every hour, and we watch the plant evolve. But what's really happening down at the cellular level, down at the kind of the molecular level? So post-flight research here, that's where it gets exciting, and I gotta help me out here. So we go, and this is going under they call it hard X-ray tomography. So we're basically doing 3D modeling of this plant. Now, hard versus soft X-rays, I had to kind of look that up, but it's the wavelength and it's how intense that wavelength is. And in simple terms, I'm probably not doing it justice. So a hard X-ray tomography. And once they've kind of determined the dimensionality of the plant, where that nodulation we're looking for in the roots might have occurred, then they're going to do some electron microscope work, the microscopy, drive in real deep to look at that really, small level.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's so many good things you said there. First of all, I want to back up for our listeners that may not be familiar with the bacteria-plant relationship. Our atmosphere is almost 80% nitrogen. It's inert. It keeps us from burning up every time there's a lightning strike, but the plants can't use the pure nitrogen. And that's what the bacteria does, is chemically converts it into a usable form. And that's what Ted was talking about.
Awesome.
Secondly, I love the way you talk about we don't know fully about gravity. My 2 cents on that is it's just the effect that we observe from the shape of space-time. That's what I think gravity is.
Awesome. Okay.
But
we need a bottle of wine to talk more about that, right, Kevin?
Yeah. Most importantly, I think when you guys get your plants back, you can look at the epigenetics, right? The stuff that's on top of the genes. And then my concluding comment about what you've just said, tremendous work, is I think the very best aerospace research and the very best space programs, while they're doing something in space, it's always about how can we help the Earth. I think there's always a spinoff of of what we can do to improve life here on Earth. And I think you've done a great job of connecting the dots for our listeners.
Well, our team definitely has done that. And I rely on them. I'm just kind of like the mouthpiece, right? It's like they're doing some amazing work. You mentioned epigenetics and kind of the gene expression. So we're learning, like I said, I started from a zero baseline here and we're getting better each time. Honestly, here, the first time we flew our experiment, we basically roasted our seeds, 37 degrees Celsius. We ran a model organism called the Arabidopsis, and it was like, let's try this hardware. Didn't work. So we series, and it's gotten a lot better now. And so, but we have to fix the plants in space to bring them home, so they're kind of set in a stasis. They're not biologically not continuing to do what they want to do, because we don't want to see the changes as it's coming back down to Earth and it's sitting on the ground again. So we fix them. The fixative that we used, glutaraldehyde, on this mission is not optimal for genetics work. So we ran 3 tubes in this experiment. So here's where it gets to an interesting part. And 2 of those tubes, we used the fixative, and the valve on the 3rd tube, we decided not to open. Our plants looked like they were dying anyway, but the bacteria, if we could actually sequence that bacteria, we could compare the rhizobia that was the colony that was evolving in space and the ground, our ground unit, and to see how that might shape up. And so just to keep in mind here, ExoLab, while we run that one mission in orbit, we have schools around the world that are connected using that ExoLab that I talked about.
Yes.
And so this is a really kind of a simple device here with the carbon dioxide temp and humidity camera. The lights have a variable control for photo period, light intensity, and even the wavelength of light. And so we have got schools in Sri Lanka, in Nigeria, in Germany, and Greece, and South Africa, and Australia, and Japan, and Canada, and of course a whole bunch of them here in the United States. And when we fly that one mission, it's like the rocket's going up, right? How exciting is that to watch at Kennedy there, or you're in Virginia and you're watching your payload go to space? And so we have schools around the world that connect to that. And then we have on-orbit activities that usually last about 4 weeks. The SpaceX Dragon, the cargo Dragon, spends about 30 days on station. So we go up, we get installed, we run about 30 days, we get uninstalled and come home again. And there's been some flights in the past, and we've actually gone up on a Northrop Grumman Cygnus cargo vessel. Of course, they don't come home, as you guys may know. They actually get filled up with all the garbage and debris that's not recyclable. That's something we can work on. How might we actually have a full system that works? The space station has the benefit of being so close to the planet. You can't do a lot of things that you're doing on the space station if you plan to go to Mars. That's a long voyage, and so you can't get more water. You can't. If you got debris there, you just got garbage. You're gonna have to do something with it. So, but the Northrop Grumman Cygnus capsule gets filled up with all the garbage, and it gets burned up in the atmosphere again. So you don't want to take that ride home, right? So we have to wait for the SpaceX to take us home. Thank goodness for SpaceX.
Right.
If it wasn't for them and for the National Lab, we couldn't do what we did.
So I have one last technical question. So when you bring back your ExoLabs, you mentioned they come back on the back of the Dragon. Does that mean they're unpressurized?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's my ignorance here. So they are contained. They are pressurized.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're in a controlled environment. I say trunk. I just that's probably the wrong.
So as students may be preparing their ideas for future experiments, that would be something that might change the way they made their plans. Excellent.
And my final technical question, if that can even be a thing for me, right? I'm just the communications person, part of our show, but
questions are great.
I'm trying to understand what the students actually are working with. You showed me the ExoLab. For our listeners, it looks like a box. I can't tell if it's an app on your phone, or what, are they building something, or do they come up with the ideas that someone then builds and then they track the mission?
Right. So this is interesting. To run something in space, as you know, it's laborious and it takes a lot of work. And usually you need to work with a pretty small group of students if you want to really get it done. If we're working with like 15,000 students, there's no way we're going to be able to get them all involved. Another thing that we noticed when we started Magnitude, and this kind of goes back to our name, how do you increase reach orders of magnitude? I can work with a half a dozen kids and we do an amazing experiment, which we're doing the engineering and the design, and we're running that experiment, we're getting it back. But how many lives have we changed by doing that? Half a dozen, right? But in a really high impact way. So narrow and really deep. What we did is we're much more shallow than what you guys do, Kevin, with your CubeSats and what have you, but we're really broad. So we reach a whole bunch of people for inspiration. And so while we run that single mission, it's more about the science side rather than the engineering side. Now, having said that, as we get ready for our next mission, ExoLab 10 runs a year from now in October of 2022. We'll be flying on SpaceX 26, right? We haven't designed that mission yet. The framework's there. We know the lab dimensions. We know most of the functionality of that lab, but we don't know the actual biological investigation in detail. That's when we turn it over to our community, our network. We'll narrow it down a little bit. So we'll have a couple choices. In the case of this plant that we flew, going back a couple missions, we had something we called the Leguminate Challenge that happened right when we were getting into the pandemic. Oh my goodness, thank goodness that shadow is kind of going away here, but it made everyone, I think, rethink learning. But what we had everyone do is like, you know what, we're going to be flying this mission, and we're going to have a bacteria, and we're going to have someone, a legume we're going to fly, but which one should we fly? And so we had the Leguminate Challenge, and we had different teams, Team Green Bean or Chickpea or, or soybean, and Trifolium, Little Red Clover won out in that kind of head-to-head competition. And it was really playful. It was creative. People did their posters, and they made their argument why, and here are all the features. Here's the vitamins, or here's how fast it grew. And so to us, that was an engagement that allowed people to connect. And it wasn't about, how might we build this code and write it to make it work? Now, having said that, I think there's room, especially as we move into the future, where we're going to want to task engineering teams to develop those types of solutions. And I know that is the emphasis of your project. And I'd love to find a way to collaborate with you guys.
Well, that's a definite.
And that's like a 2023 timeframe. We set that up. We could probably get that done, or 2024. I don't want to wait too much longer than that. 2022, if we were just like knocking it all down and there was funding to make it work. But realistically, I think if we kind of set our sights on a 2023 project, or, at the same time we have a woman or a person of color landing on the surface of the moon, wouldn't that be cool? One of our ambitions is not just these cube labs on the space station, but we want to go to the surface of the moon. How might we plug into those CLIPS missions and the whole Artemis program? And then there are 4 conjunctions this decade between Earth and Mars. That, to me, is the train schedule.
Right.
To get on the 2026 or 2029 sortie heading to Mars, who else is going to be on that ride? Hey, I just need a few kilograms, right? So, kids, what do we want to do? How might we put a garden on Mars, right?
I totally get that. You need something that's Velcroed to that first astronaut's arm when they get out on the surface. They pull it off, they set it on the ground, and then they go about their business, but it's magnitude IO on the moon.
And it's you guys, it's all our students around the world.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, when your students in different parts of the country participate with you, do they run a ground control experiment while the actual experiment? So they're running the same experiment so they can compare the data that you get with their own data. So that makes it very real for them. So that's
absolutely. And so our platform here, and I don't want to belabor it by log in and showing our platform, but we have side-by-side comparisons of here's your plant on Earth, because we've got the camera. So you could be at home or over the weekend or on the holiday, and you can log into your classroom, you can see your plant. And right next to it is the plant growing in space. We have a little slider, you can go back in time, and you got the gauges, you can see the carbon dioxide and the temperature and humidity changing and whatnot. And what's also cool is you can replace your lab with any other lab around the world. You want to see what's happening in Sri Lanka, what's happening in Kenya, you can log those in and you can see that plant. And you go, well, that's interesting. I'm looking at these plants and they all have this kind of behavior when the humidity is getting up to this level. That's interesting. And of course, our space station is kind of more consistent. But this is just really early days, I'd say, when we think about these investigations. And that's our novel approach. In 2018, we're recognized for this as an innovation award, because for just a single payload, in that case, it was just a 2U equivalent, we had literally thousands of students involved in that, just squeezed into that little 2U. So let's put classrooms in space. How might we do it? I'd love to see 100,000, 1 million, 10 million, 100 million students involved in experiment, especially if it means go into your backyard, dig into your ground, your soil. What living things do you have there? How might we make that better, right? How might we use the plant bacteria interactions to rejuvenate that soil? And here's some curious things we have about the lunar regolith and some curious things we have about Martian regolith. How might we amend those so we can actually grow something off world. And so let's make life better here. And while we're doing that, maybe we can figure out how to make life work over there. But for now, I think this is my spaceship. I want to make sure it's working really, really well. And then if we can discover really how to make that happen in the new kind of 21st, 22nd century kind of thinking, rather than the 18th, 19th kind of century thinking, then I think we're on to something. And so with that, hopefully with you guys, we can start doing some really cool stuff.
Perfect. I can't believe we're already out of time. There are so many more questions, and I hope that you'll come back with us again. And we're going to talk after the show as well. But I always kind of end with a inspirational kind of words of wisdom. But I want to tailor it a little bit specifically, if it's okay with you this time. You opened up by saying you're not an engineer, you're not an educator. So for those of our listeners who are thinking, well, you know what, space, like I'm not going to be an engineer, I'm more of an artsy person. What advice do you have for those teachers and students and parents out there to be inspired to see space as a possible career field, even if it's just tied to our Earth, as you said?
Right. Well, whether it's space or anything else, I think what's important again is that it resonates with you, right? It's something that you feel like that's your calling. And for many, many years into young adulthood, I really didn't have a sense of direction. I was a little kind of wandering, if you will. And that's just my personality. Other people are really direct and they're really focused. They know exactly what they're going to be. Kudos to that. That just wasn't my personality. And people operate a different way. So some people operate in that way. They know procedurally exactly what they want to do, really engineering mindset, very analytical, very process oriented. They got their list and they go through it. And I'm really kind of like amorphous and I'm trying to connect things. And so follow your heart, but also surround yourself with those people that will support your dreams and visions. And also, if they really are great friends, they'll nudge you a little bit and say, hey, do you really want to do that? Maybe you also want to add this to it. And hopefully you're able to listen and hear that they really mean well for you. But if you want to thrive and survive and do the extraordinary, you follow your heart first, but also keep in mind that what you got to survive, you got to make things work. So there's that advice, there's just who's asking that question, and it's stay inspired and look for mentors, right? My goodness, without mentors, where would we be? Find that one person or those group of people that will support you. They're always the naysayers, and those are the people they're good to listen to, especially if they're really, really smart. Right. But someone said once that if you really want to find a solution, you don't ask the experts, because they're going to tell you what we already know. Right. Mm-hmm. You're going to ask that person that is kind of in a way almost ignorant, and they'll ask that silly question. The wisest people are the youngest ones. Little 3-year-old or 4-year-old ask the silliest question. You're like, my goodness, what is that? It's like, and it's so profound. They don't really understand it, but it's just like an obvious thing to them because they're not filled with all the cruft that we grow up with. We kind of add to our things. And fear, I think fear is a big factor as well, where we're afraid that if we say something, people will take it the wrong way. Or I raise my hand because I have a question and everyone's going to think I'm stupid. You know what? Ask your questions. There are no dumb questions. The dumbest question is the one that's not asked, right? So I guess and I can go on and on.
Well, like I said, we're going to have to bring you back. There's no doubt about that. But as we're leaving, how could someone find you? Where could they go if you want to share your social media?
Go to
I'll pop those links in the chat too.
My goodness. Go to magnitude.io and you can learn about what we're up to on social media. Pretty much any social media, you can find me just at Tagami. I usually pop in. I'm the first one there. Someone snagged Tagami on Instagram, so that's not me. And actually, I'm not really active in Instagram. Maybe I'm still holding a grudge. But most frequently, you'll find me on LinkedIn and on Facebook. But Twitter, I think I did it back in 2006. But I'll go in there and I'll do my searches there.
Wonderful. Ted Tagami, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you soon, having you come back in the future. Thank you.
That sounds great. Let's go to space.
Yes, let's go to space.
In the future.
All right. Yeah. All right. So I hit the record button again, but the you talk about our careers have parallels, right? Because I was like, I'm going to be an astronaut. I grew up with the $6 Million Man and Star Trek and Space 1999. Those were my things.
Exactly.
So, I ended up. I'm a biochemist and I'm just glad I graduated, but I started out as an engineer, right? I had that linear path figured out, but it did not work out. And I actually think part of the secret sauce to a guy like you is it's all the diverse background that you have that is what makes you able to
Maybe.
come
I
at
don't know.
things sideways, right? We come at it sideways or in a way that
Yeah.
the linear folks don't get. So that's, I mean, I got kids that are entering the Edison Awards for us, you know, for inventions and competitions because they want to do entrepreneurship. And there's not a place for them to do that in middle school or high school. So I like the idea. And you made a comment about depth and breadth. I totally get it. We you know, we have to do both, right? If we can find a way to get those kids that are determined to do this, we got to feed those cheetahs. We also need to inspire so that more cheetahs can emerge, right?
Yeah, we're the base of the pyramid, right?
Yes,
You guys
yes.
are near the top of the pyramid there, right?
Well, but they all have to start out at the base.
That's true.
Everybody starts out at zero. That's what I tell my kids. I don't care where you come from. We're all starting at zero. The only important thing is what's your delta, right? How much do you improve? Or you know, how much do you change?
Change over time. Yeah, there
Yeah,
you go.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
See, it's always about the delta. It's never about where you start at. So
yeah,
I'm going to buy an ExoLab. I know I meant to do it in the fall, but I just got overwhelmed. We switched jobs. We were at a school that had primarily gifted and twice exceptional kids, and the school was going in one way and we were going in another. And the school it was unsustainable for me because I want to build satellites and do remarkable.
And they want higher test scores.
Actually, they want people to pay tuition and not talk too much. You know, just sort of keep quiet, pay your bills, you know, pay your tuition. And
well, it was also that it was an autonomy factor. I think as we were starting to grow and we could see how there was almost like a track, you know, there's almost like an aerospace and innovation academy, which is what we're now doing, this track. So for students who really wanted to then maybe look into internships in the field and to be able to take their class time and to actually make it something outside of a classroom, that wasn't necessarily the same vision anymore. They really wanted their hands in it. Like the minute we're saying we need to be part of who the teachers are who are coming on board for something like that, and the clientele, you know, there needs to be. So it just was a parting of a difference of opinions, and visions, I think.
Quickly, because of time, we actually have a 12 o'clock podcast, but I want to ask you a question. If you have not decided on the payloads for ExoLab, is it 11? ExoLab 11? 10. If you haven't decided on the payload, my kids love open-ended questions and problems. I think that's something, and actually, believe it or not, we're doing a PDR at NASA on Saturday, and one of the teams wants to fly rhizobacteria and look at its longevity and its sustainability, its viability as a function of time and space. And
well, there you go.
So
we'll have some post-flight data they can actually use,
which is very cool. But I just see a lot of, I don't know what the right collaboration is, but I think that I saw your map where your customers are all over the world. I saw that on your webpage.
I want to bring these to Palm Beach County. We've been having such a hard time getting stuff in with the county, with the district. Yeah. And it seems to me like this is one of those things where we can say, look, it's being done elsewhere. There's no reason why. Here are the reasons why we have to do it. Yeah. So, you know.
And here's my last question is we're going to IAC. We're going to Dubai with a bunch of
Oh my goodness, you guys. Wow, lucky
there?
you. I wish I could afford that. I won't be there, but there are people I want you to meet. I didn't have a chance to talk about it. So you probably heard about the Deep Space Food Challenge that NASA put on?
No, but I can imagine what it is about is it sustainably make the food or provide?
Yeah, it's like, hey, you know, you need to produce food that's healthy for the astronauts. Getting them to Mars and back alive that's like minimal, right? But you want them to come back healthy. It's not going to be really good PR if they come back looking really like they're almost dead or they have died. That's not going to be good.
Right.
So. And there's nutritional issues. Our storage mediums don't function properly. You're going to need to do in situ food production, no question about it. And so Deep Space Food Challenge was put on by NASA and a group called the Methuselah Foundation. Methuselah is an organization that looks at Methuselah, I guess, is a figure from the I don't know what
from the Bible, longest
there you go.
person in the Bible.
There you go. So oldest guy, and I know there's an olive tree called Methuselah as well. It's something 1,000 years old, but so it's a life extension is really what they're focused on. So they supported and funded this thing in Dubai. They're going to make an announcement. I need to introduce you to the Gobles who are kind of running this project. Dane and Florina are like the project leads on it. So they're going to announce the winners on the 20th before the actual conference, and they're going to have a panel. I understand Martha Stewart's going to be on the panel, and that Scott Kelly is going to announce the winners.
Wow,
So
that's cool.
right. So that's happening. But here's the thing. There's a group that we're working with called Destination Imagination. So Magnitude, Destination Imagination, with support of Methuselah. And we have a letter of support from the Office of STEM there at NASA to create a junior version of that, because that was designed for collegiate and corporate and DIY citizens, but you'd have to be older. So we're going to open up this project to be younger folks to imagine what we might want to do under a deep space food challenge. But here's the thing, we're talking about Spaceship Earth. We're already in deep space. And so we're going to be looking both on sustainability on Earth as well as that long distance voyage question. So if you're going to Dubai, I want to make it intro so you guys can sit there and convene with them. And if anything, we can collaborate with Destination Imagination, and your kids can get involved in this deep space food challenge.
That would be great. That's what I wanted to ask you is how might I further your cause with
there
that?
You go. And how might I further yours? And so I think, honestly, guys, we're like peanut butter and chocolate. It's like, I think you guys are like the chocolate.
I love Reese's.
There you go. And I think we're like the peanut butter, right? Like peanut butter is like, it's kind of a little sticky and it can go everywhere, but that chocolate is really what you're looking for, right? And I think you look at that, that foundational stuff that we are trying to create, reaching as many students around the world as we can, and as a high fidelity as we can go, possibly, and still have impact. And you guys are pretty much taking it all the way to the top. It says, let's get them up there, and let's crank on that, or let's code this thing, and let's really make it happen. Sure. And between those two things, I imagine that we don't need to boil the ocean here. Simple and measurable. I'm sure we can find something in the next 18 to 24 months. And if we have that roadmap, a decadal view, imagine the year 2030. That 12-year-old girl or boy is going to be out of college at this point. How might we have affected their lives? How has the planet changed in that time? And what can we say when we look back here in the year 2030 on what we did between this year, 2021, and then? And I'm really excited about those possibilities. And I have no idea where it's going to go. And I'm meeting so many cool people like yourselves. And they're all over the place. And they're sometimes in their places that have been ignored right here in our country, as well as in other places around the world. And activating those young Einsteins that haven't been found yet is what I'm passionate about. Yeah, because we're going to need everyone to solve the problem.
Three asks of you. One, will you talk to my wolf pack sometime? That's a 3 p.m. California.
Answer is yes.
Will you talk to my students in my classroom? They're our space club.
Yes.
And third, I've been an ISS space ambassador for a few years. I have not put anything on the ISS. The morning the Columbia broke up, I was with students preparing proteins at Cocoa Beach to go up on Discovery. And they said, let's go outside and listen for the sonic boom of Columbia. And that's how close I was to putting proteins for crystallization up on the Discovery. Up to the ISS. So my question to you is there if you think of it, if there's a way for me to be more involved
yes, there is.
With the ISS as far as my education, could you keep me in mind?
Yes, there is. So it's been formalized. We got lucky back in 2016, 2017. It was open solicitation. You could just submit a proposal. They'd work with you. They'd modify it. We got accepted. We went through 3 different rounds with them. Now they have these announcements that come out. There'll be 2 announcements coming out next year. You want to do that, right? And I can introduce you to the folks that can actually help get you manifested to fly. We rely on Space Tango. There's others, Nano.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I misspoke. I definitely want to be connected to the hardware folks. I meant as far as the committee that you serve on.
Oh, my goodness.
Education.
Oh, you would be so impactful. My goodness. Yeah. So that is, I guess, outside of my domain, so much as like we serve at the leisure or pleasure of the board, the directors and the new CEO. I've got a 2-year term there, and your mindset is exactly what we need there. And as that comes up, I will definitely make part of it. It would be wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you. And so we will whatever you need us to do in IAC and Dubai, as far as we can get it done, we will
go. Well, I'll tell you, I think you'll have fun. So I want you guys to meet just to have some fun. And They're actually, now I don't know if I can pull this off, but I understand that Martha Stewart's going to be holding a dinner. It's a really kind of select dinner. And they were asking me, I want to go and whatnot. I'm just like, I can't afford it, and time and all that other stuff. Stupid. I should probably get on a plane and go, right?
It's worth the credit card. That's the way I look
Yeah,
at
you
it.
know what?
I'm never going to have a chance
So-
to go to Dubai.
Well, we
Yeah.
had 6 papers accepted, so we're going with students, and the kids are going to present. That's
Oh,
why. we're going.
congratulations. That's fab. I definitely need to make an introduction to the Gobles. I'll do it right after this call.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll include also Andrew Whitmore, or that's part of the Destination Imagination project that's doing this Deep Space Food Challenge, and we'll figure it
listen,
out.
I'm going to promise you, I'm going to make you a deal. I'm going to buy this ExoLab. I'm going to have my kids do it, and I'm going to have them write papers for technical conferences about the students' perspective of the ExoLab experience, and maybe compare it to like CubeSats, and they could do a nice analysis of the benefits, like pro cons of using either format and learning from the student's perspective. I think that might be an interesting
Absolutely.
paper.
Your students are so lucky to have you guys. I tell you, really, honestly, that's amazing. Hey, it's just so I share this with you. Although ExoLab 9 is returned, we have cohorts that are running and starting the experiment like right now. This today, we have a second cohort beginning, and they will, when they start their experiments, they're going to look at day 1. Happened, whatever, 7 weeks ago, and they'll see it and they'll progress through it. And as they're finishing, that's about the same time we're going to end up with our post-flight research. And so they'll have this wonderful continuity that our first cohort that did the live part won't get. And there's even a third cohort in which we've got some folks from Morocco and Germany that will be joining us in this third cohort because of their school schedules and what have you. And then just so the ground trials. So ExoLab 10 flies in October, but we'll be doing some ground trials to be determined late January, February timeframe, in which we're going to be asking our schools and our students and teachers to, here's our problem set, let's start unpacking it and help us figure out where we want to go. And so it's like, what's the right medium, and what's the right temperature, and all these other things, and what's the right seed planting configuration.